Part 12. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 111. Greet walked happily in her hospital. This hospital is located on the east side of Heartland City. In terms of housing or shops, the location is not very good. To the north, there are soldiers, craftsmen, clerks and low-level priests. In short, it is the area where the urban middle class lives. If you walk a little to the south, you will reach the slums. People who can afford to build such a two-story building should originally lie further north. But for Greet, this position is exactly what he wants. Close to patients. It's so close to the poor who can't afford medical treatment. Why did he open the hospital? Of course he wanted to teach more doctors and treat more patients. It's not like you're here to make money. Whenever you need money, just go find a rich person and give it a try. Well, calling it a hospital is too flattering. The total number of beds in tertiary hospitals is more than 500, and there are more than 500 health technicians. The total number of beds in second-level hospitals is 100-499, and there are no less than 100 health technicians. The total number of first-level hospitals is 20-99 beds, and there are many health technicians. There must be at least 3 doctors and 5 nurses. Gretel looked around and saw that this so-called hospital was not even worthy of a community health service center, let alone a first-class hospital. It was just a health service station. Hey, but no matter what, this is my medical institution. Mine. He looked from room to room. As soon as you enter the hall, there is a table directly opposite the door, which can be regarded as a medical table. There are 3 consulting rooms in a row on the left, each with a table, a bed, a chair in front of and behind the desk, and a bench against the wall. On the right is a large observation room with 3 single beds placed side by the window and a series of benches along the wall. Passing through the observation room, there are treatment rooms and treatment rooms lined up. A door at the end of the treatment room is tightly closed, which is the anatomy room reserved by Greet. Behind the medical desk, the entire kitchen was transformed into a disinfection room. A specially built simple pressure cooker was responsible for the disinfection of all instruments, gauze, and cotton wool in the hospital. On one side of the disinfection room is an examination room that is temporarily out of use, and on the other side is an upward staircase. The toilet is located at the back of the building, across the stairwell. The second floor is the private area of doctors, or priests. When you go up the stairs, you can see the spacious living room and dining room at first sight. On the right side of the living room, directly above the consulting room on the first floor, there is a lounge for the priests. There is a corridor on the right. Walking along the corridor, facing south are the study and Greet's bedroom, and facing north are the storage room, pharmacy, and alchemy room. What? Kitchen. What kind of kitchen do a bunch of ungrateful guys want? Let them refine the medicinal ingredients and make a meal or something, or the kitchen will blow up. The tavern is not far away, so why not ask someone to deliver food every day? It took half a month to decorate it to this extent. The decoration team of Quan Shui Temple is really reliable. Gretel counted on his fingers. The territory he occupies by himself includes the bedroom, study, and alchemy room, and the anatomy room is currently under his control. The combined area of several rooms is close to 80 square meters. Being independent is indeed the only way to improve conditions. You know, his residence in the master tower is less than 40 square meters. What makes Greet even more happy is that the wooden floors in the bedroom, study, living room, and lounge are smooth. The consulting rooms, treatment rooms, and anatomy rooms all have bluestone floors, which are polished smooth and flat, easy to wash, and corrosion resistant. Wooden wainscoting is installed on the walls, and wooden ceilings are installed on the ceiling. If you perform surgery or something, at least dust will not suddenly fall down. The details made him even more happy. The square plates in each clinic are shiny, the gauze jars are clean, the tongue depressors are all newly planed by carpenters, and the burrs have been polished clean. Trash cans and covered garbage bins are separated. Just look at the layout. It looks very familiar. It is already a mature hospital and can receive patients. Unfortunately, in the first few days of opening, there was no business at all in the hospital. Gretel was not in a hurry, and leisurely watched other people endorse bones, muscles, internal organs, vasculature, sensory organs, nervous system. Come on. Systematic Anatomy has 21 chapters and more than 400 pages. I just wrote an abbreviated version, which is less than 1/10. Little Gretel, can you not memorize it? Priest Donald was dizzy and couldn't help begging. Hell, there are 206 bones in the human body alone, although some of them are in pairs, more than 100 bones to carry. It's not just about reciting the name, but also the shape, position, and relative position to other muscles, internal organs, and blood vessels. The skull alone, the frontal bone among the 23 skull bones, has 12 anatomical structures to carry, including the frontal scales, frontal tubercle, and zygomatic process. If you don't back up, just get out of the way. Joanna shook her shoulders, trying to squeeze him away. Scribe can only copy text, not pictures, and there are a lot of pictures in Systematic Anatomy. So Greet only copied a few text versions of the textbooks. As for the atlas, he hung them high in the library for them to look at. This kind of learning is very painful. Holding the book, facing the map on the wall, raising the head, lowering the head, raising the head, lowering the head, trying to read and recite. Several people have to queue up to memorize the same picture. The only advantage is that they are less likely to get cervical spondylosis. Don't carry it. Okay, Gretel's voice came from far away. If you can't memorize it, you won't be allowed to take the exam. If you can't pass the exam, you won't be allowed to have surgery with me, who will take the exam first. I come. Little John jumped up and shouted. The abbreviated version of Systematic Anatomy with only 1/10 of the content is not so easy to memorize. After memorizing it for 3 days, 5 people took the exam and only 2 passed. Joanna from the Church of Natural God, Patrick from the Temple of God of War, that is, the 4th level priest and the battle boss. The remaining 3 were completely wiped out. How much more do we have to carry? Priest Donald, who had the lowest score, asked tremblingly. Good question. Gretel held up his chin. With the free hand, break it off, break it off, break it off. 53 volumes of Blue Love of Life and Death, or a complete set of clinical medicine professional planning textbooks. You don't need to study traditional Chinese medicine, medical computer application, physical education, and health law, but you need to make up for the prerequisite high school mathematics, high school physics, chemistry, and biology. If you calculate it this way, in 5 years, you study 12 hours a day. If you study diligently and have excellent qualifications, you will probably memorize it. Then there are internships, regular training, and lifelong work and study. Well, don't thank me too much. With a bang, Priest Donald fell to the ground and fainted. Gretel held back laughter and dragged him aside. Pulled out a stack of textbooks, thought about it, and put back 3 books. Come on, everyone who has passed the exam, let's continue talking about joints. Help. Thanks to @bookfriend 20210123180747029 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It was such a pleasure to write this kind of chapter about taking stock of family property. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 112. Gretel left the priests at the hospital to watch the show, and strolled back to the Mage Tower. The host of the Mage Tower, Master Gearman, saw him for the first time. He was heartbroken and almost beat his chest. What a pity! What a pity! Why did you give up this opportunity? It's only one day away. After you figure out that magic, if you hurry up, you can still catch up with the envoy of the Magic Council. Greet smiled sarcastically. You can catch up if you hurry, but as a doctor, how can you turn around and leave when the plague is ahead? In the entire Heartland City, or in other words, in the world, he is the only doctor who can perform bacterial culture and detect infectious agents. Without ensuring that all water sources are purified, and without seeing with his own eyes that the number of patients is zero, how can he go to the Magic Council for further training with confidence? Master Herman sighed in regret for a long time. Gretel listened with a smile, knowing that he cared about her, and did not refute. Master Gearman sighed enough and finally patted him on the shoulder. Okay, now that you're back, don't leave. There's everything in the Mage Tower. Just read quietly and work hard to break through. This. Master Gearman, I came here to ask. Gretel hesitated, can I take the book to the city to read? After all, I still have a hospital. No. Master Gearman suddenly frowned. He blurted out. The books from the Mage Tower are not allowed to be taken out. Lord Gearman, I am really too busy. Greet begged with all his strength, if I don't break through the priest level, I can't break through the mage level. It's not that I don't want to read in the Mage Tower, I just immerse myself in studying. Magic can't break through. You. Master Gearman flexed his knuckles and tapped on the table, struggling back and forth. You have to agree, because according to the rules of the Mage Tower, magic books are not allowed to be taken out of the tower as usual, or you should agree, Gretel's previous contribution to the Mage Tower is really not small. More importantly, there is currently no level 1 mage in the Mage Tower, which means that no one is competing with Gretel for books. Forget it, I'll ask Karen and the others. He finally relaxed. As a 5th level mage, Herman has basically no need for level -1 magic books, however, Karen is still a level -2 mage, and Elliot has just broken through to level -3. Who knows if they need them? I have no problem, Elliot replied generously. He has been stuck on level 2 for several months and has read all the books he should read at this level, let alone level 1. Besides, he was able to break through to level 3 only because he got the insights from Gretel. How could it not be convenient? I don't have any problem either. Karen was not far behind. After exiting the 5th floor of the Mage Tower, he quietly found Gretel and asked him one thing. It's like this. I have a cousin named Lin Ji who is a mage apprentice. He introduced me to the profession before, could you please do me a favor and let him work for you as a pharmacist? Ling, Greet reflexively curled up the corners of his mouth. Master Karen on the opposite side was a little unhappy. What's wrong? It's okay, it's just that the name is quite friendly. Ringer's solution, also known as compound sodium chloride injection, can be used instead of normal saline to regulate body fluids, electrolytes, and acid-base balance. Clinically, when doctors transfuse blood to patients who have lost a lot of blood due to trauma, surgery, or any other reason, they often think of bring on some Ringo. In this distant foreign world, suddenly hearing such a name is really very kind. Gretel reluctantly pulled back his thoughts. He flattened the corners of his mouth and asked curiously. Mage apprentice? Won't the Mage Tower give him a job? It's like this. Only then did Greet know that the Magic Council had a rule not to raise idle people. Generally speaking, if a mage apprentice cannot make a breakthrough within 2 years, he cannot live and eat in the Mage Tower for free. Either take care of the industry for the Magic Council, or make a living on your own. Greet had never seen any other apprentices in the Mage Tower before. It was because the others either upgraded or were unable to break through and were sent out. The mage apprentice named Lin Ji is an unlucky guy. He neither wants to take care of the property outside the mage tower like ordinary people, nor can he break through on his own. After years of wasting time, everything was in vain, and even the family property was almost depleted. Master Karen couldn't stand it, so he had to put down his old face and find a way to find a job for him. Pharmacist. Gretel held up his chin. Speaking of which, his hospital was ready for everything else, but the medicines were not as good as expected. According to the rules of the previous life, even if it is a community health station, there are more than 20 major categories, dozens of subcategories, and 200 to 300 kinds of necessary drugs. At the very least, penicillin, lidocaine, nitroglycerin, epinephrine, chlorpheniramine, etc., as well as alcohol, iodophor, and normal saline, you have to give me these. There is nothing in the world. He distilled the alcohol himself and has been struggling for several days. I'm in need of a pharmacist here, Greet agreed generously, partly because of Master Karen and partly because of the name. You ask him to come for an interview. If there is no problem with the operation, I will use him. At worst, he can help wash the flask. Greet thought viciously. Ringer came to the door early the next morning. Carrying a wooden box with copper-wrapped corners on his back, he carefully walked up the steps, stood at the door and knocked. Is Mr. Nordmark here? That's me. Gretel sent the priests to endorse the teachings in the clinic, and he sat in front of the consultation table, writing and drawing. Anyway, he didn't have to be in the study to write textbooks, and he could also look after the door. Hearing the voice of inquiry, he raised his head from the table and stopped writing to look at it. At a glance, Ling appeared to be in his 40s. Greet was not familiar with the appearance of Wei Guo Ren, so he didn't know if his judgment was accurate. His waist was a little bent under the weight of the box, and his face looked slightly sad. He was wearing a dark blue silk robe with clear creases on it. It had obviously been ironed carefully before coming out, but the material had become a bit dull and brittle. The leather boots under my feet were a little deformed because they had been worn for God knows how long. I'm Ringo Farrell, introduced by Master Karen, and I'm applying for a job as a pharmacist. He reached out cautiously. Gretel stretched out his right hand to shake his hand. His eyes lowered and glanced over his hand. There are traces of ink stains on the thumb and index finger pads, and the knuckles of the middle finger. There are several scars on the back of the hand, which look like they were either acid burned or alkali burned. Gretel was slightly relieved that the guy in front of him at least had practical experience. You brought alchemy equipment to your door? Come on, let me see how you operate it. Greet was delighted. And Ringer really lives up to his name. Although his operation speed is not fast, he is very stable. Gretel watched him take the medicine, heat, evaporate, filter, crystallize, distill, and extract. Each operation was neither fast nor slow, and was very organized. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. It's you. With a monthly salary of 5 gold coins, you are responsible for making 1 gallon of distilled water, half a gallon of saline solution, and 1 pint of alcohol every day in the hospital. Okay. Thanks to at Feng San Washu and at Luoshui Dui for the 100 starting coins. Little Greet finally got rid of the most boring job. Throw flowers to celebrate. Please collect, recommend, and review books. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 113. Gretel left the largest and most boring daily preparation work to the new pharmacist, and happily plunged into the alchemy room. The two people were busy back to back. Ringer set up the distillation device and watched the condensed water fall into the container drop by drop. After making sure that he didn't need to keep an eye on it for the time being, He slipped over to see Gretel. I was startled as soon as I passed by. Gretel squinted his eyes, holding a thin quill pen, and was drawing lines on the long glass tube. The glass tube was fixed on the wooden shelf, vertically downward, with one end hanging in the boiling hot water. The water splashed, and the hot steam hit Greet's face, but he seemed to be unconscious and concentrated on drawing the line. In the center of the glass tube, a thin bright silver rose straight up. Greet's pen tip landed on the end of the bright silver, pulled it horizontally, and then moved his steps to compare it carefully. After observing for a long time, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Nailed it? Lin Ge asked curiously. Greet unhooked the glass tube from the shelf, carefully laid it flat, and drew a long line along the wall of the tube. Listening to Lin Ge's question, he looked back happily. Make a thermometer. When? What? Thermometer, Greet's eyes sparkled. Oops, it really made his liver bleed. I was stuck in the extremely hot studio, working day and night with the jewelry craftsman, a small place where the jewelry craftsman moonlighted as a glass blower, for 7 or 8 days. Isn't it just a glass pipe? One stick costs less than 10 yuan on Doubao, and 10 sticks cost 30 yuan. Shipping is free and shipping insurance is included. As a result, in this different world, he had to do everything by himself. Heating, stretching, pinching off, just this step alone will destroy countless glass tubes, then heating, welding a short glass tube up, heating and vacuuming, so that it can absorb mercury. Turn it upside down, insert the lower part into the ice water, let it shrink to the bottom and heat and seal the top. Fortunately, inhaling mercury was the last step. It was specially placed next door and specially cooled with ice water. If he works a little rougher, the mercury vapor can poison him, believe it or not. Thermometer? What does this do? Ringer was confused. Greet raised a bright smile. It indicates the temperature. Oops, the body temperature is 37 degrees 5 or 38 degrees 3. Finally, I don't have to touch it with my hands. Although a thermometer is not as good as a stethoscope or a sphygmomanometer, it can still be considered a useful gadget in clinical terms. Really, without tools, it will look wrong wherever the disease comes from. Well, you see, the mercury in the glass tube expands when it encounters heat, and contracts when it encounters cold. Look, I inserted it into ice water now, does it go down? Then insert it into boiling water, he ascended again. At different temperatures, the height of mercury is different. We use this principle to indicate temperature. Just hold the lower part and don't move it. After a while, you can see the temperature of your fingers. The useful thing in Gretel's mind is almost like a small artifact in Ringer's eyes. As he listened to Gretel's explanation, his eyes became brighter and brighter. He held his breath and stretched out his fingertips to pinch the mercury bulb of the thermometer. Greet simply handed him the thermometer. Try it yourself, be careful not to put it on the fire or break it. Don't bother me, let me think about how a straight line is divided into 100 parts. Gretel muttered and threw himself on the table, scratching his scalp desperately, trying to remember how to draw the tick marks. Murmurs kept coming from behind. It expands when it's hot, it shrinks when it's cold, it expands when it's hot, it shrinks when it's cold. Hey, uncle, you are very savvy. Thermometer or something, nothing else matters, only the 4 words thermal expansion and contraction are the essence. Gretel smiled secretly and raised his voice. Different substances have different boiling temperatures. You can try more. When doing distillation and extraction, use a thermometer to help control the temperature. The efficiency will be higher. Yeah. Lin Ge responded in surprise. Greet ignored him and finished marking the temperature mark, then turned to do the bacterial culture experiment. The thermometer is not a valuable thing, so as long as you don't smash it, you can play with it as you like. But doing experiments is more important. From time traveling to now, he has accumulated a lot of topics. Finally, a coolie came to the door. The most tedious tasks of making distilled water, making physiological saline, and making alcohol were thrown away. Hurry up and do experiments. Gretel hummed and arranged a stack of petri dishes on the table and put down the culture medium. Half of the petri dish was filled with aspic, and the other half was filled with agar. Thank God, he finally bought gelidium. Next, spread out a row of gauze, a ceramic spoon, a scalpel, and a piece of wood used as a tongue depressor. Wash your hands, and place your left hand face up on the table. 1, 2, 3. Magic trick, clean. The light of magic trick shines continuously on all materials. Greet rubbed all the experimental materials, including the fingers of his left hand, on the two culture media. Next, take the same high-temperature sterilized material and rub it over both media as well. Finally, wash your hands, disinfect them with alcohol, dry them, and carefully apply the culture medium. Let me think about what I'm missing. By the way, purifying diet. Water creation. Use the sewage treated by the purified diet and the purified water generated by the water production technology to complete bacterial culture. Greet labeled each petri dish and wrote down the source of the sample and the culture time. After doing this, he finally breathed a sigh of relief and returned to the study to start writing the paper. On the sterilizing effect of mage tricks, purifying diet, and water creation. Well, let me think about it. Should I go back to the mage tower and add the water in the water element pool for comparison? Boom! There was a sudden explosion outside the door. Gretel's hand trembled, and a large drop of ink fell on the paper, immediately staining the paper. What happened? Don't let the alchemy room have a problem. The still is still there. One cannot walk away. There is also a sterilization room downstairs. The pressure cooker must not explode. He rushed out desperately. In the lounge opposite, Priest Donald also rushed out with a book in his arms. There was a series of footsteps on the stairs. Alvin, Joanna, and Patrick, who were reading in the consulting room, together with Little John sitting at the front desk, rushed up. What's the matter? What happened? Little Gretel, are you okay? I'm fine, Gretel shouted back. He followed the sound and rushed into the alchemy room opposite, and saw the new Lin Ge lying on the window with half of his body leaning out of the window. Hearing Greet's footsteps, he tremblingly raised his black right hand, tears streaming down his face, crying and laughing. I broke through. I broke through. I finally broke through to a level 1 mage. Woo. So it was you who did it just now? Greet rushed to his side and looked down. The smell of gunpowder smoke has not yet dissipated in the air. Opposite the alchemy room and below, there is a black burn mark on the roof of the bungalow, which has obviously been burned by the flames. Gretel swayed on his feet and quickly took 2 steps back, summoning the strong wind to blow away the smell. Ling. Even if you break through, don't blow up the toilet. Thanks to @bookfriend 20210420150519849 for the reward of 3,000 starting coins. Thanks to @origami and gart for the 100 starting coins. After checking the information, I found out that making a thermometer is very difficult, so difficult. Finally, I changed my plan and asked the protagonist to find a jeweler to make it instead of letting him make it himself. And I would like to lament that modern industry has really reduced costs so low. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 114. Ringer's breakthrough set off an undercurrent in the city. People came in droves to deliver gifts, inquire about news, and ask if their nephews could be sent to work. Gretel was unmoved. When it's time to write textbooks, when it's time to do experiments, when it's time to make the pastors recite it, We make the pastors recite it until the sky is dark. Every day there were patients who could be cured by other priests, but he didn't take any action and just watched leisurely. Suddenly a month passed. Among the priests, the one with the slowest progress has also memorized the entire systematic anatomy. The one with the faster progress has already dissected 7 or 8 rabbits with Gretel. After cutting and curing, the rabbit was really in trouble for 8 lifetimes in their hands. It didn't even have to die, and it had to be used for all kinds of unbelievable experiments. Therapeutic magic antibacterial experiment No. 035. Gretel stood steadily in front of the dissecting table. He picked up the skin of the rabbit's leg with the skin tweezers in his left hand. He pressed his right index finger on the back of the scalpel and scratched it gently. The voice came out steadily from behind the mask. Little John was sitting on the table in the corner, writing furiously. Take a midline incision and open the abdomen, cut the skin and subcutaneous tissue. Use the water collected by hydrogenesis to directly prepare physiological saline, flush the abdominal cavity, and heal the surgery. Hang a mark and keep it in a separate cage until the treatment effect is evaluated tomorrow. How many more rabbits are you going to cut up? Joanna whined. An identical rabbit, cut open, rinsed with distilled water, healed by the holy light. Rinse with the water created by the water-making technique and heal with the holy light. Use the well water from outside, brush it with the magic of purifying food and then rinse it, and the holy light will heal you. Use the water created by the water-making technique, brush it with the purifying food technique and then rinse it, and the holy light will heal you. Open the abdomen, flush the abdominal cavity, and heal. Open the abdomen, flush the abdominal cavity, and expose it for 2 hours to heal. Cut the leg muscles, flush the muscles and subcutaneous tissue, and heal. What's even more devastating is that after the healing is complete, you have to make another incision the next day to take blood, cut the flesh, and then heal. She is a servant of the God of nature. Listening to the sounds of nature, communicating with plants, and soothing animals are her expertise. Watching those rabbits being cut up and down every day, whining every day, even if they don't die, she will almost collapse. I mainly want to see how the holy light's antibacterial effect is. Gretel stopped his hands and thought seriously about how to explain it to them. If the operation is performed under germ-containing conditions, the holy light's instant healing cannot affect the prognosis, and the operating room does not need to rely on a sterile environment. It's so pitiful that he still hasn't found the time to produce disinfectant. Antibacterial? You're talking about the short, pole-like thing last time? But doesn't that make people have diarrhea? That's just Shigella dysentery, sister. There are thousands of types of bacteria in nature. Gretel paused for a moment and thought seriously about whether he should pause the local anatomy at the end and bring up the medical microbiology to the front. Help! Pastor, help! A sharp cry suddenly came. Gretel paused his hand and turned his head outward. With a bang, the door of the anatomy room was pushed open, and Priest Donald rushed in with his robe carrying the wind. Gretel! Someone is seriously injured outside. Bring it in, Greet ordered immediately. He hurried out, and as soon as he stepped into the hall, he secretly took a breath of air. Blood flowed all the way in. The injured man was carried by 2 men and rushed in. His whole body was limp and his head was tilted to one side. The thighs and calves were twisted into strange shapes, and the clothes on the abdomen were torn. How was he injured? Greet quickly walked up to greet him. After asking, without waiting for an answer, he immediately turned around and shouted, "Stretcher! Stretcher! Carry him to the treatment room. Cut off the clothes." Little John and Patrick filed out, took the injured person on a stretcher, and immediately carried him to the treatment room. The 2 men who were bringing the injured were blocked by Greet. They looked into the treatment room and said anxiously, "He was trampled by a horse. Little Parker was just standing in the middle of the road. When the carriage came, he rushed over and pushed the child away, And then? Where did you step on? On my stomach, on my legs were run over by a wheel. Where's the head? Where's the chest? It's definitely not on the head. But if you fall to the ground, you might hit your chest. The man recalled hesitantly. His companion replied in the affirmative. There's definitely no chest. He's holding little Parker. Thank God. Gretel breathed a sigh of relief, turned around and ran back. Rushing into the treatment room, 2 4th-level priests, Patrick and Joanna, were applying healing spells to the injured. Priest Donald stood beside the head of the injured, and Pastor Alvin stood at the feet, praying. Little John was the lowest level. He took the scissors and clicked on the patient's clothes. He had already finished cutting off the entire upper body. Well, it's just not easy to use without an assistant who has received orthodox medical training. Greet slammed the door, shutting out the 2 men who had brought the injured. He walked quickly to the operating table, and as he walked, he was already asking a barrage of questions. Is the injured conscious? Are you breathing? Is there a heartbeat? Blood pressure? No, forget about blood pressure. What's your pulse? The 4 or 5 priests looked at each other. For a moment, Priest Donald looked down at the injured man's face and was the first to answer. Fainted. Can't wake up. Breathe, more, Patrick continued. After releasing the magic, Pastor Alvin leaned over to listen to the injured person's heartbeat and continued to report, there is a heartbeat too. The pulse is very fast and very weak. After Joanna answered the last question, she hurriedly added, Gretel, you need to find an elder. Or a bishop, or even a high priest. Our level is too low, and we don't have enough healing skills. I'm afraid I won't be able to save him. No hurry, Gretel looked around. 2 level 4s, 1 level 2, a priest apprentice, plus 1 level 1 from me, the amount of treatment should be enough, the key is how to use it. Joanna, he checked the injured person's heartbeat and breathing to make sure they had not stopped, and ordered decisively. You keep an eye on the patient's condition, use treatment techniques to keep him alive, and keep his heartbeat and breathing constant. Patrick, first tie his legs to stop the bleeding, what I taught you before, then get the alcohol cotton balls from the cabinet and rub them all over his stomach. Alvin, Donald, you 2 go wash your hands with me, and John go get the surgical instruments. In addition to installing a magical array, the spring water temple also drilled a well and used a fountain to bring it to the ground. The water pipes then led to the consulting room, treatment room, disinfection room, and toilet. Gretel didn't even need to leave the door of the treatment room, just washed her hands with tap water and started to apply alcohol on them. Unfortunately, the previous magical antibacterial experiments have not been completed yet. If it could be proven that exposure to a germy environment for a short period of time, for example, 2 or 3 hours, would not have a significant impact on the effectiveness of the treatment, he would not have to resort to the 7-step hand-washing technique. Greet secretly felt regretful. Before he could finish his thoughts, Joanna, who was assigned to look at the patient by him, had already begun to scream. Gretel, come here quickly, he's dying. I am coming. Greet came flying over. Please collect, recommend, and review books. By the way, I would like to ask everyone, do you like to watch some content that seems to be more hardcore? Still get bored? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 115. Is the injured person dying? Greet came quickly. Alas, if this were in his emergency department, there would have been a fixed procedure. Open the airway, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, blood replenishment, fluid replenishment, volume replenishment, epinephrine injection, dopamine injection, and infusion of mannitol for patients with craniocerebral injury. It was so commonplace back then that it was almost becoming a mechanized process. Only when you are in a different world and recall it do you feel it is so precious. No endotracheal tube. No adrenaline, no dopamine, no mannitol. The needle used for blood transfusion has not yet come out of his liver. The jeweler's skills are so poor that he has not succeeded yet. As for rehydration and volume replenishment, that guy named Ringer didn't even make Ringer's solution. The sterilization is incomplete, the liquid has too many impurities, and if it is infused into the blood vessels rashly, everyone will die. Either there are too many impurities and cause blood clots, or bacteria enter the blood and cause bacteremia, all of which can be on the market in a matter of minutes. As for magic tricks and purifying food, the sterilization ability of the liquid created by this magic and divine magic is not up to the level he needs. In my previous life, I studied for 7 years with a bachelor's and master's degree and worked for more than 10 years. Most of the skills I learned were useless. Gretel sighed secretly as he hurried forward. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, I arrived at the patient's bedside, and I had regained my spirits. So what if there is no condition for blood transfusion? So what if there is no medicine or medical equipment? So what if there is no equipment? The foundation of modern medicine has never been these. It is the way of thinking of evidence-based medicine, the treatment principle of judging severity, prioritizing, and combining the whole and the parts. It is the diligent exploration of the mysteries of the human body, which supports us to move forward step by step. Gretel, Joanna said urgently. Gretel leaned down and pressed against the injured man's abdomen, while responding loudly without raising his head. Watch your heartbeat and breathing. Use healing techniques to hold on. Hold on. He stretched out his hand and patted the injured man's abdomen once, twice. Then asked the priests on the side to move the patient, let him lie on the left side and the right side, and pat him respectively. The more he percussed, the more he frowned. On the left, Patrick finished binding the injured man's left leg and raised his head. How is it? Moving dullness, Greet replied hastily. After thinking for a while, he explained again. The abdominal effusion is at least 1000 ml, if you are unlucky, these 1000 ml are all blood loss. Then stop the bleeding quickly, the 4 priests present shouted in unison. Gretel shook his head decisively, wait a moment. Patrick, look at the injured spine. The spine is fine, the god of war priest reached down, stroked along the injured man's spine, and replied immediately. At the same time, Greet rushed towards the injured man's head and rolled his eyelids. I win. Illumination. Take a photo of the pupils. A beam of white light came straight. Greet lowered one eyelid and then raised it again. The pupils on both sides are about the same size and round, and the light reflex is normal. There is no obvious trauma to the head, and there is no damage to the brain. Thank God. There is really nothing I can do about the head injury. I don't have mannitol, any medicine, no CT or MRI. If it is really a craniocerebral injury, apart from asking the patient to risk his life, the only other option is Schrödinger's treatment. There was no damage to the brain and no fracture to the pelvis. Let's talk about the limbs, arteries, nerves, etc. Gretel let out a breath and stretched out his hand to Little John, who was holding the equipment box and running towards him. Disembowel. The scalpel fell heavily on his palm. Greet made a cut in the middle, and a large amount of blood immediately gushes out, staining the treatment bed red. Little John reflexively shouted. Ah! The others were of high rank and knowledgeable, but they did not scream along. However, there was still a sound of gasping for air. Greet remained unmoved and shouted in a deep voice. Donald! Draw away the blood. Pull the hook. Still no liver came out of the attractor. Fortunately, the priest of the spring temple is here, so I can only use him as a human flesh attractor. Priest Donald stepped forward and murmured a prayer. Following his gesture, the blood in the injured man's abdominal cavity turned into a rainbow, silently flying up and falling into the bucket. As his vision gradually became clearer, Gretel leaned over and searched quickly in the injured person's abdomen. While rummaging, he connected with his fingers. Portal artery clamping. Splenic artery clamping. Bilateral renal artery clamping. The translucent mage's hands flew around, clamping the blood vessels one by one. Patrick, the god of war priest beside him, poked his head out and was dumbfounded. Is this okay? Of course. The hand of the mage consumes less, has flexible shape and accurate placement. The point is, no need to disinfect. You can get as much as you want, so you don't have to find out you don't have enough blood vessel clamps and have to panic and ask the nurse to get them. Greet's lips curled up slightly. He held up the liver. Treat minor injuries. Treat this liver. A white light fell. The level of treating minor injuries is only a little higher than that of treating minor injuries. A level 3 priest like Priest Donald can throw out dozens or 20 of them at random, but as soon as the magic fell off, the broken liver began to squirm and grow together. It returned to normal in a few blinks of an eye. The magic is really immediate. Even though he had seen it more than once, Greet still couldn't help but admire it in his heart. In the previous life, half of the liver had to be cut off when it was broken into pieces like this, and the remaining half had to be sewn up for hours. Then, I still have to be frightened and stay in the ICU for 10 days and a half, hoping that the liver will grow back on its own. Hey, talking about it brings tears to my eyes. He thought quickly, put down the liver, and took out a broken spleen. Another culprit of massive hemorrhage. In his previous life, he would have cut it off as soon as possible. But in a world with divine magic, it's a different story. Treat minor injuries. The spleen is much smaller than the liver, only 1/5 to 1/10 of the liver in terms of weight. After treating minor injuries, the white light still had the power to spread upwards after repairing it. Gretel quickly put it back in its place, let the white light jump a few times in his abdominal cavity, named some ligaments and omentum, and went to check the kidneys himself. Tisk, there seems to be nothing wrong with the left kidney. Just to be on the safe side, I'll treat minor injuries and get one. The right kidney is in some trouble, let's treat minor injuries again. Kidney done. Pancreas done. Gallbladder is easily done. All the large blood vessels visible in the abdominal cavity were brushed. How is the condition of the injured? Greet looked up. Joanna kept staring at the injured person's heartbeat and breathing, not daring to relax for a moment, and replied after hearing this. Stabilized. Although he is still unconscious, but he has stabilized. She looked at Gretel with surprise. On the other side, Patrick's eyes widened and he murmured. 2 to treat minor injuries, 5 to treat minor injuries, 2 to treat minor injuries, 5 to treat minor injuries. For such a serious injury, it was absolutely impossible to stabilize the injury with 2 treatments for minor injuries and 5 treatments for minor injuries. It's impossible to double it, and it's even impossible to double it. However, what he saw with his own eyes left no room for doubt. After Gretel cut open the injured man's belly, he really stabilized the seriously injured person who was on the verge of death with just these few healing techniques. Gretel, you are so amazing. It's not that I'm great. Greet sighed secretly. It is the guidance of modern medical techniques that allows me to know what order to treat and which parts to treat first. It is a magical instant cure that prevents patients from still struggling on the road to healing after the operation is over. It is the patient's own constitution that allows him to survive until now without oxygen, blood transfusion, or all life support. Perhaps I should also thank fate for allowing this patient's injuries to be within the range that I can handle. He calmed down and raised his voice. To save his life, we still have to do a lot. John, go get the saline solution. Work harder and faster, he can survive. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 116. He can survive. Gretel's voice rose high. At the same time, Little John was running out to get saline solution, and these words were transmitted directly to the hall outside through the open door. What, can you really live? Very good. The hall was already crowded with a large group of people. The two men who brought the injured's wife, children, brothers, and the family of the child whom the injured rescued, the adults cried, the children screamed, and there was a quarrel. Pharmacist Ring tried desperately to maintain order, but to no avail. He only worked himself up to the point of sweating profusely. As soon as Little John opened the door, a dozen pairs of eyes looked over at the same time. When Gretel shouted he can survive again, everyone was pleasantly surprised and there was a sensation. The two people who were close rushed in and ran inside. Really? Really? How are you now? Are you okay? Don't let them in. Gretel screamed. This is the operating room. How could the patient's family members just come in? No more sterility principles in the operating room. Little John quickly stopped and stretched out his arms to block the two people. Unfortunately, he was just a trainee priest. His small body could stop him here, but he couldn't stop him there. He was rushed backwards by the two men at full speed. He had no choice but to grab someone's clothes with one hand, raise his voice, and struggle to shout. Don't go in. Don't go in. The treatment hasn't been completed yet. Greet knew something was wrong when he heard this voice. He was agitated, and it was only then that he realized what he had overlooked. This is not a previous life. It's not like he was in the hospital before, with people coming and going in the emergency department, security guards patrolling back and forth, and the operating room having many checkpoints. From top to bottom, there are 6 people here including him. All 5 doctors, priests, entered the operating room, and only one pharmacist was left outside. He couldn't beat anyone, and he couldn't yell. He should at least get another security guard. Don't come in. Gretel had his back to the operating room door, unable to get away, so he could only shout at a higher volume. Little John struggled hard on his own, retreating step by step. Seeing that he had already retreated past the door frame of the operating room, Pastor Patrick suddenly stepped forward and spread his arms. Go out. Go out. This God of War priest has been stuck at the 4th level for several years. Instead, he has reached the warrior level and has broken through the 5th level in one go. This move was completely overwhelming. He threw people out one by one with each hand, blocked the door and shouted. No entry. Do you hear me? If you break in again, you will throw the wounded out together and we will die. This loud voice sounded like the bald bishop, and the whole 2-story building buzzed with his roar. After shouting in one breath, he slammed the door with a bang. Did you hear that? No one is allowed in. This roar finally shook the place. Greet was able to continue the operation in peace, and while stroking his intestines, he explained to the priests. When you encounter a seriously injured patient, especially if there is more than one injury on the whole body, and everything looks urgent, there is a certain order of treatment. In short, wherever the patient dies faster, treat it first. To put it simply, we first look at the heartbeat and breathing. If these two are missing, the person will die within 3 minutes. Next, look at the abdomen. If the internal organs are bleeding profusely, death will be faster, only a little slower than the heartbeat and breathing. Next is the spine, head, pelvis, arteries, and nerves. If treated in this order, the probability of death is the lowest. The 4 pastors all pricked up their ears, listened hard, and memorized hard. Patrick suddenly asked. I have treated someone who was trampled by a horse before. There was no bleeding anymore and the person could stand up, but then he suddenly fell down and died. I didn't pay attention to the internal bleeding. That person is his neighbor, his colleague. In that battle 3 years ago, when the man entered the battlefield, he pushed him away with all his strength, but he himself fell under the horse's hooves. Back then, he exhausted all his healing skills and finally stopped the other party's bleeding, but he still watched him die. From that day on, the hierarchy of priests was not allowed to advance even to this day. Huh. Very savvy. Greet glanced at him appreciatively. However, when faced with his question, she didn't even think about it and just shook her head. I can't say without seeing the patient. It's possible to have internal organs, brain damage, or even more secretive situations. When you encounter this kind of patient, you can only be said to be unlucky. It's not that you haven't done anything well. In their previous life, they had an old man in the hospital who came in sideways and went out vertically. The patient was satisfied and the family felt at ease. The uncle walked to the payment window to pay. Then before he could reach the queue, he fell down and died. The final diagnosis was aortic dissection. Where can I go to reason with you? That old man was admitted to the hospital with a broken thigh. Patrick mused. Greet let him go in a daze, and he worked through the intestines section by section, repairing the damage, pouring saline to flush, and checking for active bleeding. All finished, I wiped my sweat. Joanna, go and send a message to the teacher, tell him that he can come later and bring me the oak stick first. Patrick, stand in Joanna's position and watch the patient's heartbeat and breathing. If you have any questions, call me at any time. When, prepare to close the abdomen. Save a little, use the treatment for minor injuries first, and follow my instructions. The abdomen must be closed layer by layer, from the inside out, don't throw healing techniques indiscriminately. Come on, let's close this layer first, which is this sparse membrane. What will happen if you just throw the healing spell? Patrick asked suddenly. Greet stared at the slowly healing omentum and answered casually. The seams are not aligned properly, the inner layer cannot grow, the inner and outer layers stick together diagonally, or the intestines stick together, or the intestines leak into the cracks from the wrong seam, all kinds of troubles. Who knows what may happen? Patrick shut up silently and watched Greet's hands flying, using the mage's hands to pull the muscles and skin of the injured, closing them layer by layer, and then shouted to Alvin to use the healing technique. While pulling and explaining. This is the peritoneum, this is the extraperitoneal fascia, transversalis fascia, and rectus abdominis sheath, we cut along the linea alba. Otherwise, we would see the posterior layer of the rectus abdominis sheath, the rectus abdominis muscle, the rectus abdominis sheath, the anterior layer of the muscle sheath. The abdomen was closed here, and on the other side, Joanna's goshawk gave a clear cry, folded its wings, and flew down to the window sill with an oak staff in hand. There was a beeping sound on the window lattice, and Greet looked up and was immediately overjoyed. We're here. Bring it in quickly. The teacher's oak cane. A light source that detects magic. The radioactive source of X-rays. Just when he had finished treating the abdominal injury and was about to start treating the 2 legs, the things arrived. Come on, help this man up and let him lie on his side, Greet gave orders like a barrage. Put the oak staff behind your back, let me take a look at the bones first, you all also enter the meditation field, take a look at it clearly. Well, the skull is fine, the cervical spine is normal, the spine is normal, the ribs are not broken, and there is nothing wrong with the pelvis. Thank God, great. Okay, let's lay him flat, and let me see how the 2 legs are broken, so that it can be easily reattached. In the slightly darkened meditation field of vision, there are 206 bones from head to toe. Those things that I had to memorize a month ago were clearly visible under the white light at this moment. So he looks like this. Priest Donald, who was pampered and had never broken his arms or legs with his own hands, muttered to himself. No wonder you need to find a teacher. Joanna clenched her palms. There was only one level left, and her oak staff could still be used without having to travel thousands of miles to ask for help from the elders. So, that's it? Patrick stared at the bones in his meditation field of vision, unwilling to blink at all. If only I had known it earlier, if I had been able to see it earlier. Old Walter, Carl, Ron, your legs. Is it possible to stop being lame? Hey. Don't be in a daze. A drop of water passed over his face. When Patrick came back to his senses, he saw the translucent mage's hand slowly fade away, but it was Gretel who shook his face with water droplets. Come to your senses. Help me carry my thighs. A high-level warrior. The perfect coolie. I want you to come here because I want you to help carry my thighs. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. It's the end of the month and don't save the remaining monthly passes. Remember to vote for me. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 117. Many medical students, except of course the gifted ones, have painful memories of carrying their thighs. Orthopedic surgery has always been like a construction site, with the sound of electric saws, hammers, and electric drills resounding throughout the operating room. Change the hip joint, femoral head, hold a fat man's thigh and keep it motionless for several hours. You know, one leg of a person accounts for about 1/5 of the body weight. Imagine a 200-pound strong man undergoing surgery. You hold a 40-pound object in a special position and cannot move. After carrying it for 3 hours, not only his 2 arms, but also all the muscles in his body were no longer his own. This is why orthopedics are all about strong men. In the hospital where Greet worked in her previous life, the orthopedic surgeon was over 1.8 meters tall, with broad shoulders, a narrow waist and long legs. The average person can run a horse on his arms, stand on his fists, and lift iron all year round. He is not in the operating room but in the gym. During the ward rounds, everyone from the Department of Orthopedics to the deputy director to the interns were all dressed in uniform and wearing white coats. Under the leadership of the chief director, they walked out vigorously and could automatically bring the BGM. I can dominate the world at will. Everyone is looking up to me. Gretel was not tall or muscular in his previous life. I suffered enough during my rotation in the Department of Orthopedics, but this time I had the conditions, and no matter what, I had to find a strong man to take over. Pastor Patrick did not disappoint. After Greet clamped the blood vessels in the thigh, the man spread his hands, firmly held both ends of the injured person's right thigh, and pulled it apart to both sides. Gretel just stared at the meditation field and kept giving orders. Pull again, we are almost in place, slow down a little, okay. Hold still. Just stop here, don't move, wait for me to set the bone. As the saying goes, an arm cannot twist a thigh. When an orthopedic department encounters a patient with a thigh fracture, the upper body is usually immobilized, and a separate person is sent to hold the patient's thigh with both hands and pull the patient outward as hard as possible. Pastor Patrick, however, used just 2 hands to steadily pull away the muscles at the broken bone and keep it still. It is such a joy to have such an assistant to help me perform orthopedic-related surgeries. Gretel was happy, and Pastor Patrick was also shocked. In his meditation vision, he watched Greet turn around, looking up and down at the leg bone from all angles, then pushing it back bit by bit and instructing him to rotate it inward. While moving, he muttered. This time, the middle 1/3 of the femoral shaft was fractured. Hey, I'm really lucky. It's difficult to stop the bleeding if it goes higher, and if it goes lower, there will be more damaged blood vessels and nerves. After a fracture, the muscles stretch and break it into an angle. Therefore, the adductor muscles must be stretched apart to reset the bones. I said you should move your hands. You hold it so tightly, I can't even push it. It turns out that this is what you should do when setting bones. Pastor Patrick stared at the leg bone in his hand, secretly trying to remember. No wonder the legs he treated often went crooked in the past. After the bones were broken, they would be crooked. He just used magic without knowing anything, and the crooked bones would not straighten themselves. He pulled, moved, and relaxed according to Gretel's instructions. In his meditation field of vision, the two ends of the broken bone finally came together, making a perfect fit. Pastor Patrick was secretly prepared and was about to cast a healing spell at any time, but he saw Gretel touching two hooks and calling Alvin and Little John. Hook dash. Pulled apart one by one, pale and broken bones were exposed. Greet called Joanna and pointed to the broken part. Healing. Just treat this bone. Ah. In the end, the healing skills still fell behind. The cracks on the bone stubble disappeared, and Gretel patiently straightened out the muscles one by one. If there were any damage, Joanna could perform targeted treatment. 1 place, 2 places, 3 places, 5 places. These bits and pieces are often solved by treating minor injuries with one shot, or they don't even need to treat minor injuries, just a touch of positive energy and that's it. The muscles, blood vessels, and nerves were treated together before the skin was healed. After the calf was treated according to the same procedure, he clapped his hands together. Patrick. There is still one leg left, you can treat it? Yes. Did you see clearly what I just did? It doesn't matter if you can't see clearly. You start first and I will give you guidance. This is a good opportunity. What a great opportunity. Patrick looked at Greet gratefully, stood up, washed his hands, and confidently held the injured man's left leg. Just as he was about to pull away, he was suddenly startled. I have both hands occupied, so I can't use the healing technique. Gretel. Isn't it possible that healing techniques are triggered by thoughts? If you have to free your hands, who can I ask to carry my thighs? Joanna had been observing them with interest. Seeing that the two of them were in relative embarrassment, he smiled crisply. Hey, don't underestimate me. His long, white hands held the injured man's thigh. Deeply sink your fingers into the muscles, apply force to both sides, and pull away steadily. Gretel slowly opened his mouth on the side. Sister, you don't show your real face. Doing it yourself will give you a different feeling than watching others do it as a coolie. Pastor Patrick strictly followed Greet's process and completed it carefully. He felt the bones of the broken leg creaking under his hands, watched the damaged muscles become complete, and then penetrated the holy power into the broken leg and felt it again. Suddenly closed his eyes. The feelings of the previous hour, the books I had memorized over the past month, and the experience of treating the wounded in the past 10 years were all swirling in my mind. Successful, failed, puzzled, enlightened. Happy, regretful, guilty, relieved. Time passed by minute by minute. Patrick opened his eyes suddenly, clasped his hands, lowered his head and prayed. Dozens of white lights fell straight down, framing the unconscious injured person. Tranquility, Little John blurted out. Greet was stunned for a moment before he remembered that this was a magical technique he secretly named anesthesia. It was a special feature of the God of War temple and required a 5th-level priest to cast it. Have you upgraded? Yeah. I've upgraded. Patrick stood there blankly, staring at his hands for a while, and then staring at the white light in front of him. After a long silence, he answered in a sleepy tone. I finally upgraded, 7 years, 7 years. He was once a genius that everyone admired. After reaching the edge of upgrading, I was stuck for 4 years. I had no clue and took the risk to join the war. In that battle, he lost his best friend, and also lost the hope and motivation for a breakthrough. Until today. Someone told him that maybe it wasn't your fault, it was just bad luck. Someone guided him to see a more wonderful world, and it turned out that healing can still be like this. Thank you. He murmured lowly, Greet, thank you. Thank you. Continue the treatment, Greet shouted. Seeing Patrick bowing his head in shame and continuing to release the healing spell, Greet turned to the window, smiled, and clenched his fist hard. Anesthesia. On call. It will never be needed again. Whenever anesthesia is needed, someone will call the bald bishop. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 118. Another upgrade. Elder Irwin finally came in a hurry. When he pushed the door open, he saw a forest of white light restraining the unconscious wounded man in the middle. It is the iconic tranquility spell of the Temple of the God of War that only level 5 priests can cast. His steps immediately stopped. The old man looked at the white light in front of him, and at Pastor Patrick's face that seemed to be crying and laughing, with muscles twitching, and he was filled with emotion. Little Greet, you are also too popular, right? Open a treatment center. Oh no, this kid insists on calling it a hospital. A few days after opening, a new pharmacist came in and was upgraded on the same day. More than a month after opening, the 4th level priest was upgraded to 5th level. If you include Master Elliot, who had a breakthrough before, there were 3 people who had a close relationship with Gretel, and there were 3 breakthroughs in 3 months. 2 of them have been stuck for many years. God knows if he hadn't released the news in time that I have arranged all the staff, come to me, Little Greet's hospital would have been overrun by people giving gifts. Even so, he broke through another one today, and I'm afraid he can't hold it back. Teacher, Greet turned around and was immediately overjoyed. Teacher, I'm waiting for you. We have healed all his injuries, but he lost too much blood and my healing skills can't handle it. Teacher, it's up to you. Oh, I lost too much blood. Elder Irwin nodded and stepped forward. He took the oak staff, held it in front of him, and chanted in a low voice. As he chanted, light green light spots spread out like fireflies, flying in from the green leaves at the head of the stick, from the air, and from the window, and landed on the injured person. Visible to the naked eye, the injured man's lips were slightly more bloody, and his breathing was a little heavier. It turns out that the healing technique can also replenish blood from a distance. Gretel stood beside the teacher obediently, watching the injured recover bit by bit, and watching the family members carrying the injured away with great gratitude. As soon as the people left, he grabbed Elder Irwin. Teacher, can you do me one more favor? What do you want again? Teacher, look, there are 6 priests and 1 pharmacist in this hospital. They are so busy that there is no one to maintain order. Teacher, can you introduce me to another soldier? It'll be too late by the time you think about it. Elder Irwin glared at him angrily. Okay, the teacher has already released the news, and there will be responses in the past 2 days. Before that, do you want to hide in the Mage Tower for a few days? Ah. Do you know how many people are trying to push people in these days? The bishop and I have been blocking it for you before, and today another one broke through. I'm afraid I can't stop you. Don't, before the news spreads. Let's go. Wait. My petri dish. My rabbit. Teacher, at least call a few carriages. Let's go. We'll deliver the things later. Elder Irwin didn't waste any time. He directly picked up Gretel and threw him on the horse. Slap the horse hard on the butt. Let's go. The mount suddenly started to move. Greet swayed, hugged the saddle, and let the old horse take him out. In the distance, I heard someone shouting from behind. Your Excellency Nordmark, this villain is here to deliver a gift on the order of the master of the family, Your Excellency. Gretel was thrown back to the mage tower. In the words of Elder Irwin, you should practice in seclusion for a period of time and break through as soon as possible. Whether it is a mage level or a priest level, if you can break through to level 2, there will be far fewer people who dare to kill others. The better your talent, the less others dare to offend you. Okay, just change the place to do the experiment. Moreover, he is also very interested in the water element pool in the mage tower. He has not yet done a bacterial culture experiment in the pool water. Gretel was packed up and thrown back to the mage tower. For 1 day or 2, he stayed in the master's tower and had a great time doing experiments. Less than half a month later, the small square outside the master's tower was crowded with carriages and horses, and it was time for Master Hermann to give an open class again. The largest room on the first floor of the mage tower was full of about 20 or 30 people. As soon as Gretel stepped into the classroom, the group of people all surrounded him with a roar. Mage Nordmark, I have a question to ask you. Mage Nordmark, can I go to your healing clinic to help? Mage Nordmark, it will be my sister-in-law's coming-of-age ceremony in 5 days. Can you please come to the dance? Master Nordmark, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I made these snacks myself. Gretel. Go away. Who is wearing perfume? It's killing me. These are auditors, with a monthly tuition of 10 gold coins, and are eligible to read in the mage tower. Also, you are eligible to listen to Master Hermann's public classes twice a month. Greet used to be one of them. Of course, he had never even attended a public class, so he just wanted to be a mage apprentice and didn't have to mix with them. These auditors were all dressed in silk, satin, gold and silver, and some girls even had gemstones shining on their earlobes and necks. He looks very rich. Of course, he is not from a noble or wealthy businessman family, and he cannot afford the tuition fee of 10 gold coins a month. Cough, cough, cough. Bang bang bang, Master Hermann's cough suddenly sounded, accompanied by the sound of a ruler tapping the table. A group of spectators dispersed. Greet was overjoyed and cast a grateful look at Master Hermann. Master Gearman nodded to him, cleared his throat, and began to lecture. Today we will talk about the principles of fire spells. As we all know, fire is the most passionate and violent among the 4 basic elements, and fire spells are also the most lethal. 500 years ago, the great legendary mage Clement Boyer, in his book New Experiments on the Relation of Fire and Air, summed it up this way. Fire is a material entity composed of countless small and active particles. Such particles of fire can be combined with other elements or exist in a free form. A large number of free fire particles gather together to form an obvious flame, which disperses in the atmosphere and gives people a feeling of heat. The element of fire composed of this fire particle is phlogiston. Greet opened his mouth reflexively, then closed it immediately. Master Hermann didn't notice anything strange about him. He faced a group of attentive auditors and continued talking. After a long explanation about phlogiston, we finally come to the spell application part. All fire spell models have 2 spell structures, gathering phlogiston and detracting good air. Take the spark spell model as an example. Master Hermann waved his staff and used magic tricks to outline the spell model of spark and explained it piece by piece. There was a buzz in the room, and there was the sound of the pen tip rubbing against the paper. Only Greet sat there blankly, staring at the model in the air, motionless. Burning because of phlogiston? Can air attract phlogiston? You coax me. So, the fire element I have always seen in meditation is phlogiston as you define it. If you meditate this way, you won't be able to upgrade even in 10,000 years. I wrote today's new chapter 3 times and deleted them all. I wrote it a 4th time and it still felt wrong. I was really stuck, and when I was struggling, I got a notice that recommendations would be arranged for next week. I was so encouraged that I deleted it and wrote it again for the 5th time. Please be encouraged, please collect, please recommend, please review. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 119. On the morning of August 5th, the first experiment was conducted. Replicating Lavoisier's 20 days experiment, the mercury in the retort is heated to produce mercury oxide. Weigh 100 grams of mercury, add it to the retort. I'm really grateful that the Mage Tower actually uses metric units. It's probably the legacy of the predecessors who traveled through the big guys, and heated with a stove. 1 hour, no change. 2 hours, no change. 3 hours, no change. It is suspected that the heating temperature is not high enough for the mercury to react with oxygen. Move the retort closer to the stove. The retort exploded. On the afternoon of August 5th, the second experiment was conducted. Red powder appears on the surface of mercury, which is suspected to be mercury oxide. The retort exploded again. Improper temperature control. Let me think about what method to use. A mercury thermometer will definitely not work. On the morning of August 6th. Bimetallic thermometer. Success. The Mage Tower is really awesome. There is actually platinum in the tower. The temperature sensing element made of platinum sheets and copper sheets is the best. On the afternoon of August 6th. Continue with the mercury oxide experiment. It's really easy to use a bimetal thermometer to mark the temperature. You no longer have to worry about the retort exploding. On the morning of August 7th. When adding charcoal, my hand slipped and the stove went out. Fortunately, the fire was rekindled in time. I really want to have a furnace boy. On the afternoon of August 7th. Keep burning. On the morning of August 8th. Keep burning. On the afternoon of August 8th. Keep burning. Come on, Lavoisier did it for 12 days, but after finding no change, he waited for 8 days. On the morning of August 9th. Wizard Elliot's cauldron exploded, shattering the retort. Gretel, I'm sorry. Elliot came over to apologize. What are you doing? Greed was busy cleaning up the mercury all over the floor and had no time to talk to him. Master Elliot carefully walked around him, and when he poked his head, he saw smooth handwriting on the manuscript paper on his desk. 1. Prove the existence of O. 2. Prove that O plus combustible plus temperature equals combustion. 3. Introduce O into spell materials. What's this? Master Elliot only glanced at it and found that he couldn't understand half of it, so he immediately walked away. Gretel called him from behind, and he hurriedly walked without looking back. Experimental ideas and spell design are the secrets and wealth of every mage, and they will never be revealed to others easily. What's more, he saw the words spell materials. New spell materials, new magic, that is the core of the mage's power. If you look at it rashly, it's not much different from grabbing it tomorrow. Gretel's disastrous experiment begins again. This time, he was thoughtful and moved the experimental equipment to the small room next door so as not to be disturbed. Lucky for him, the experiment was carried out smoothly without any glitches or slippage or anything. Until late August, late one night, Gretel's cheers finally sounded in the Mage Tower. I did it. I proved dash. The air in this world indeed contains 20% oxygen. The combustion of combustibles indeed relies on oxygen. What phlogiston, what essence of fire element, go to hell. Gretel, a window on the 3rd floor of the Mage Tower slammed open. Master Karen put his head around and roared. Why are you howling in the middle of the night? You interrupted me just as I was about to meditate. Oh, meditation. Greet apologized loudly, rushed back to the third floor, and got into his room. Enter meditation, explore your spiritual power, and feel the world around you. Among the four elements, earth and water seem to have remained unchanged. Fire and wind have undergone tremendous changes. The light and elegant power is divided into dots, one part is stable and silent, and the other part is lively and jumping. And the active and jumping part is slightly separated from the former, sometimes confused, sometimes flying to the area belonging to the fire, stirring up little bits of flames. The essence of combustion is that combustibles combine with oxygen to emit light and heat. Greet felt it carefully. My mental strength doesn't seem to have increased significantly compared to yesterday. He stretched out his hand again and flicked the candlestick in front of him, and a bright flame came out of his hand and landed on the candle wick. The release speed is a little faster than before, and the power of the spell is also higher, but not enough, not enough. Gretel spread out the manuscript paper and wrote and drew under the candlelight. According to Master Hermann's lecture, every fire magic has two basic configurations, one is used to gather phlogiston, and the other is used to filter good air that can attract phlogiston. According to phlogiston theory, when a substance is heated, phlogiston cannot be decomposed automatically, and air must be added to absorb it. And good air has the property of absorbing phlogiston and can achieve combustion. Then, the configuration used to gather phlogiston points to combustibles under the guidance of mental power, the configuration used to screen good air points to the oxygen specially carried as a casting material. What will happen if we do this? Greet heard her heart pounding. He rushed out of his room, ran to the alchemy room on the fourth floor, and once again set up the alchemy device for heating mercury oxide and producing oxygen. Once the oxygen in the test tube was collected, he took the test tube and quietly went down to the mage tower. Greet, where are you going? Suddenly someone spoke in the dark night. Gretel paused and turned his head slowly. Elliot. Sorry, did I just wake you up? It's okay, I wasn't asleep to begin with. Hey, it's midnight. Where are you going? You didn't even light a lamp. As he spoke, he snapped his fingers, and four balls of light floated silently from front to back, left and right. Gretel followed him down and answered in a low voice. I have improved the burning hand and want to give it a try. Burning hands? You learn so quickly, Elliot praised. He and Greet walked into the dark night together and came to a square behind the mage tower. This is a place used by mages to practice magic. Elliot concentrated slightly and raised his hand forward. A red cone of flame spurted forward. 5 meters away, a human-shaped wooden target was caught in the flames and immediately started to beep and burn. Elliot put out the flames with a gentle wave of his hand. He turned to Gretel, his eyes bright and full of curiosity. You try. I may be a little slow. Greet replied in a low voice. He held his breath and concentrated, breathed evenly, and tried his best to get himself into a spell-casting state. Meditation. Chant the mantra. Use mental power to outline the spell model. Explode your mental power and let the spell model resonate with the surroundings. Note that the configuration that filters the air must be pointed at the oxygen in the test tube. Reach out, push forward. Boom. Flames so blazing that they turned white spewed out from Gretel's palm and exploded forward. Within 10 meters, blazing white flames swept everything in a 60-degree fan-shaped area in front of them. Wherever the flames passed, the human-shaped wooden target was immediately burned to pieces and stood on an iron pile on the ground, bursting out with bright and dazzling lightning-like sparks. Beside him, Master Elliot slowly opened his mouth. Is this the burning hand? The distance is twice as far as mine, the flame is more than twice as strong. Gretel, are you really just a level 1 mage? I revised the new chapter for the 6th time. Dead Eyes. This book will be on the shelves on June 1st. Please continue to support me then. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Please collect, recommend, and review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 120. Gretel is naturally still a first-level mage. Not only that, he has not reached the threshold of upgrading yet, and his mental power has not yet reached the limit of level 1. Gretel was not in a hurry, and used his mental power to slowly polish the self in the meditation field, one bone after another, and outline it in detail. The benefits for the trainee mage to reach the first level have been used up, and the energy given by the teacher when planting the oak staff has also been used up. What follows is all a grind, so there is no need to rush. A few a day, and when it comes to complex-shaped bones like the hip bone, you can only complete one piece of meditation every day. Until now, Greet's mental power has only completed the construction of 80 axial bones and 64 upper limb bones. As for the 62 lower limb bones, less than half of them have been completed. Maybe after completing the whole body skeleton, my mental strength can reach a higher level. Greet guessed so. In addition, he is also worried about one thing. When can I go back to the hospital? Teacher, you sent me to hide in the mage tower, when will you let me out? My experiments are all done. The paper is also finished. The papers on microscopes, the paper on burning hands, and the paper on sterilization are all finished. If I don't go back to the hospital, I won't be able to do so many tests. The teacher's call came quickly. In mid-September, more than half a month after Gretel improved the burning hand, Elder Irwin sent a message to the mage tower. The follower I found for you has arrived. Come and meet him. Gretel quickly entered the city. When I got off my horse at the door of the hospital, the first thing I saw was a big man standing next to the teacher. Elder Irwin is already quite tall, and that one is a head taller than the elder, conservatively estimated to start at 2 meters. It was late autumn, and Greet was wearing a thick jacket, but that one was shirtless, with a piece of animal skin draped across his shoulders. A chain of necklaces hangs on the naked chest, all made of the fangs and claws of beasts. Under the chain, the 8-pack ABS are clearly visible. The only weapon on his whole body was the big stick in his right hand. Greet looked at it carefully and became more and more silent. The stick was half a head taller than its owner, and its diameter was as thick as the owner's upper arm. Looking at the shape of the end, it looked like the thigh of God knows what kind of beast. Bone. Is this a barbarian? This is obviously a barbarian, right? Teacher, such a person should be my follower? If I can't support him, will he eat me? Can barbarians communicate normally? Gretel wanted to ask this question, but he really didn't dare in front of the giant man. The giant man spoke angrily. Are you Gretel? Can you feed me? What, full? Brother, do you want to eat enough? Greet glanced at the teacher as covertly as possible. Seeing Elder Irwin smiling and nodding, his heart skipped a beat and he quickly answered. Everything I can eat is what you can eat? Okay. Bernard will follow you. Let's go eat. The group of people arrived at the tavern in great numbers. Well, mighty and mighty mainly refers to Bernard, a giant man more than 2 meters tall, who walked out of the earth-shaking mountains alone. As soon as he entered the door, Bernard let go of his voice and shouted. Serve food. Serve delicious food. Serve meat. Bring a roasted whole lamb, a roasted chicken, and a barrel of beer, Elder Irwin added in a low voice behind him. The waiter's eyes lit up and he responded loudly. Okay. The roast chicken was delivered quickly. Elder Irwin cut off 2 chicken legs, placed one each in front of himself and Gretel, and gave the rest to Bernard. Greet had just taken 2 bites of the chicken legs when he watched Bernard pick up the roasted chicken, click, click, click. Most of the roasted chicken, not even the bones were left, went into the giant man's bloody mouth. Greet Khan. Gretel sweated. Greet sweated furiously. Brother, if you swallow the bones together like this, be careful of the chicken bones getting stuck in your esophagus. If it penetrates the esophageal wall and pokes an artery, even I can't save you. Most of the roast chicken was eaten, and the waiter who turned back to carry the wine barrel had just turned back halfway. The giant man simply stood up, stretched out his hand, and lifted the barrel over. The oak barrel, which is as tall as half a man, is as light as a straw in his hand. Boom! The wine barrel fell, smoke and dust flew everywhere, and the surrounding seats shook 3 times. Bernard grabbed 2 wooden cups and filled them with beer. Greet was just happy that he only had 2 glasses of wine and he didn't have to drink any more, when he saw the man holding the wine barrel, tons, 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 tons. Isn't it? Is this beer mine? Gretel stared at the cup in front of him with a frown. As for this thing, the mouth of the cup was bigger than his face and the body of the cup was taller than his forearm. It could be called a small bucket. Can he hold such a bucket? Do you want to give yourself some extra strength? Unfortunately, the power of the bull is a level 2 magic, and he can't learn it yet. Besides, he doesn't know how to drink. I will not drink in this life, nor in my previous life. Surgeons cannot drink. Even if he knew how to drink, drinking this glass of wine would already exceed his stomach capacity, right? Elder Irwin couldn't help but be amused when he saw his apprentice in trouble. He gently and deftly stretched out his hand, put the 2 wooden cups in front of him, and waved to the waiter. A glass of wine, no, a glass of mint water, some white bread, and a dish of nuts. Hurry up and bring the roast lamb. No problem. Guest, please wait a moment. It's a big deal when a customer orders a whole roasted lamb. After a while, the hotel owner and the waiter personally brought a roasted whole lamb over. Elder Irwin took a long knife, cut off a leg of the lamb, and pushed most of the remaining sheep to Bernard. Then he turned to look at Greet, picked up the leg of lamb, and put it directly on his plate. Give me all this. Gretel instinctively retreated tactically. Unexpectedly, the long knife flashed in front of him, and 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 3 pieces of mutton fell into the dinner plate, followed by the leg of lamb, and returned steadily to the elder's dinner plate. Gretel breathed a sigh of relief. With mint water, bread, and nuts, he slowly ate his lunch, which contained too many carbohydrates, too much fat and protein, and was seriously lacking in vitamins and plant fiber. He burped lightly. Opposite the seat, Bernard was still chewing wildly, suet and light red gravy dripping from the corners of his mouth, making it all over his beard. The lamb backbone and chops were completely gone. Bernard held a leg of lamb in each hand and was eating lively with his bow left and right. Greet quickly glanced at his waist. 8-pack ABS or 8-pack ABS. The barrel of beer and half of the roast lamb had no idea where they went. Can I really afford this guy? Greet was at a loss again. Elder Irwin quietly leaned towards him. Bernard comes from the northern glacier. When I was traveling outside a few years ago, I saved half of their village. At that time, I agreed to send the village warriors to serve me for 10 years when I needed it. In these 10 years, it's enough to feed him well, but he doesn't need to eat so well. You can give him armor, weapons, etc. as he sees fit. Got it? I usually eat bread, and occasionally bring meat for toothpaste. Greet was a little more relaxed. Teacher, what about the salary? Why do you think the warriors in the north need a salary? Of course, if there is a shortage of food in their village some year, you can just give them dozens of gold coins to buy food. I don't know why it's so enjoyable to write about this barbarian, probably because I can't eat as much meat as he does. No. This book will be on the shelves on June 1st. Please continue to support me then. Book Club Group Number, 6491362249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Please collect, recommend, and review books.